All right, so get this today. We're going to take a deep dive into the world of Tinder.
Tinder.
You know that app that like everyone and their mom seems to be using?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty much taken over the dating scene, right?
I mean, over 50 million users worldwide. That's insane.
Yeah.
But we're not just here to talk about the app itself. We're going deeper.
Yeah, we're gonna get into the nitty-gritty.
We're going to try to understand what really makes people swipe right
What's going on in their heads?
and what those swipes might actually say about them.
What kind of person are you based on how you're using Tinder?
Exactly. And to help us unpack all of this, we're going to be looking at this fascinating 2019 study from the Journal of Cyber Psychology, Behavior, and Social Networking.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
It really caught my eye because they did something really cool. They actually used cluster analysis to categorize Tinder users into 4 distinct groups.
That's really interesting because it goes beyond just like general trends. It actually identifies specific types of people based on their swiping habits.
Okay, so before we jump into those 4 groups, can we just back up for a second and talk about cluster analysis?
Sure.
I'm picturing like a detective's board with photos and red string connecting everything.
Yeah, it's kind of like that, but instead of suspects, we have Tinder users.
Okay.
And instead of clues, we have their psychological traits and behaviors.
Gotcha.
So the researchers, they surveyed over 1,000 heterosexual Tinder users, and they asked them about a whole bunch of things.
Like what?
Like why they use the app, what their personality is like, like are they impulsive or more laid back?
Right.
How's their self-esteem? And even their attachment style.
Wait, hold on. Attachment style. Can you explain that one for me and the listeners who might not be familiar with all the psychology jargon?
Sure. So attachment style is basically how we connect with other people in relationships.
Right.
Like how comfortable are we with intimacy and closeness?
Right.
So there's secure attachment, which is when you're, comfortable with being close to others. Then there's anxious attachment, which is when you really crave that closeness, but you're also worried about being abandoned.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
And then there's avoidant attachment, which is like when you really value your independence and you might feel a bit suffocated by too much closeness.
Interesting. So they were looking at how all this plays out on Tinder.
Exactly. They also asked about things like sexual desire, both towards partners and solo.
Oh, wow.
And get this, they even measured their level of problematic Tinder use.
There's a scale for that.
There is. It's called the problematic Tinder use scale.
Wow. They really thought of everything.
They did. So with all this data, they were able to create these 4 really interesting user clusters by looking for patterns, like groups of people who shared similar answers and behaviors.
Okay, I'm ready to meet these Tinder types. Let's hear it.
All right, well, the first group is the largest one, and they called it regulated.
Regulated.
And they seem to have a pretty healthy approach to the app. They scored low on impulsivity, high on self-esteem, and they tend to have a secure attachment style.
Okay, so these are like the well-adjusted Tinder users.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're not letting the app control their lives.
That's good to know. So are these folks looking for something serious?
Well, that's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
They're actually open to both committed and casual partners.
Really?
Yeah, and to understand this a little bit better, it's helpful to know that the researchers also use this tool called the Cybersex Motives Questionnaire.
Oh, okay. What is that?
It basically measures why people engage in online sexual activities, like are they looking for partners?
Mm-hmm.
Are they trying to cope with negative emotions?
Yeah.
Or just looking for excitement?
So it gives them a baseline for understanding motivations.
Exactly. And what they found is that the regulated group's motivations weren't limited to just those categories.
Interesting. So they're not just seeking one specific thing from Tinder.
Right. They might be exploring their options, looking for connection in different forms, or just enjoying the experience without getting too caught up in it.
It's like they're using Tinder with a sense of balance and perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's the regulated group. Now, who's next on our Tinder adventure?
Okay, so the next group is the smallest one, and they're called regulated with low desire.
Regulated with low desire.
Yeah, and they're a little more complex. They tend to have lower self-esteem
Yeah.
and anxious attachment style.
Got it.
And they reported very low levels of sexual desire.
That does sound a bit more challenging.
Yeah.
So how did they score on that problematic use scale?
Well, they actually scored low on that, which is interesting because they also reported higher levels of depressive mood compared to the regulated group.
Oh, that's surprising.
What's even more intriguing is that they were less interested in finding partners and actually had fewer matches on the app.
Wow. Okay, so if they're not really looking for partners, then what are they doing on Tinder?
Yeah, that's the big question.
Could it be about validation? Like
valid.
they're looking for a boost of confidence?
Yeah, like maybe just a little bit of a self-esteem boost or a sense of connection, even if it's not romantic.
Yeah.
That's a really good point. It suggests that for this group, Tinder might be more about fulfilling a need for social interaction or positive feedback rather than actively looking for relationships.
So it's almost like they're using the app for a different purpose than what it was originally intended for.
Exactly. It's not just about dating for them, it's about something else.
That's fascinating. All right, so we've met 2 clusters. 2
Yeah.
more to go. Who's next?
All right, now we're getting to the clusters that might make you raise an eyebrow.
Oh,
This next group is called unregulated and highly motivated.
unregulated and highly motivated. I think I can already guess where this is going. Are we talking like swipe till your thumbs bleed?
Pretty much. They scored high on impulsivity,
Okay.
and they had strong motivations across all those categories we talked about earlier: social connection, self-enhancement, coping with negative emotions.
So they're not just casually swiping through profiles. They're on a mission.
Yeah, they're actively seeking out all kinds of experiences on Tinder. They also reported high levels of sensation seeking and a strong desire for both partnered and solo sexual activities.
So they're really into the whole Tinder scene. But that doesn't sound totally healthy, does it?
Well, remember that problematic Tinder use scale we talked about?
Yeah.
This group scored the highest,
Oh, no.
which suggests that their Tinder use might be getting a little out of hand.
Like it's becoming an obsession.
It can be. Yeah, it's like the thrill of potential connections becomes more important than actually building meaningful relationships.
Right, I see what you mean. It's like they're chasing that dopamine rush of a match,
That little notification.
but the connection itself might be secondary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that can create a cycle that's hard to break free from.
Yeah, even if it's not really fulfilling them in the long run.
Right.
That's a good reminder for all of us to think about why we're swiping and if it's actually serving us. Okay, on to the final group. Who are these mysterious Tinder users?
Okay, this last cluster is called unregulated avoidant.
Unregulated avoidant.
And they're really interesting because they provide a contrast to the previous group.
How so?
Well, they scored high on avoidant attachment, which means they're not super comfortable with intimacy.
Got it.
They also had lower self-esteem and lower levels of conscientiousness.
So they might be hesitant about traditional dating and all the vulnerability that comes with it.
Exactly. But they're still on Tinder.
So they must be looking for some kind of connection, right?
Right. But here's the interesting part. They reported high levels of solitary sexual desire,
Okay.
but weren't as interested in casual sex as the unregulated and highly motivated group.
Interesting. So maybe Tinder allows them to explore their sexuality without feeling too pressured.
Yeah, that's possible. Their interest in committed relationships was actually similar to the highly motivated group.
Oh, wow.
But it seems like they struggle with the emotional closeness that comes with it.
Right. So maybe Tinder is a way for them to dip their toes into the dating pool without getting in too deep.
Exactly. They can control the pace of interactions and keep things at a distance.
It's like a safety net.
Kind of.
Right.
Yeah, they can create this online persona and choose when and how they want to engage.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet this resonates with a lot of people out there.
Oh, definitely.
Okay, so we've got these 4 very distinct groups. But here's something that really blew my mind when I was reading this study.
What's that?
Over 20% of the participants were married,
Wow.
and 44% were already in a relationship.
That's a lot.
I know. What's going on there? Are they looking for something they're not getting at home? Or is it just curiosity?
It's a really interesting question, and it definitely challenges some of our assumptions about relationships in the digital age.
Big time.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how technology is changing the way we think about love and commitment.
I think it's safe to say that things are definitely more complicated than they used to be.
Oh, kidding. So we've got these 4 different Tinder types,
Mhm.
and then we've got people who are already in relationships using the app.
Yeah.
It's a whole new world out there.
It really is. And it just goes to show that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to dating and relationships.
Absolutely. Everyone's got their own motivations and their own way of navigating this whole digital dating scene.
Right. And understanding those differences can help us be more compassionate and understanding towards ourselves and others.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think sometimes we can get so caught up in judging people for their choices.
Especially when it comes to something as personal as dating.
Exactly. But everyone's got their own story and their own reasons for doing what they do.
And those reasons might not always be clear on the surface.
Okay, so we've got these 4 distinct groups. But it's important to remember that they're not rigid categories.
Right. People can move between groups over time.
And there's a lot of variation within each group, too.
It's more about understanding the general tendencies and motivations that drive people's behavior on Tinder.
Got it.
Yeah.
So with all that in mind, let's recap these 4 clusters one more time, just to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
So first up, we've got the regulated group,
The balance.
right? They're using the app in a healthy way,
Ah.
and they're open to different types of connections.
Yeah.
Then we've got the regulated with low desire group.
Who might be seeking validation and connection more than anything else.
Exactly. And then we've got our 2 unregulated groups, the highly motivated folks who are all about that swipe life,
Living it up.
and the avoidant folks who are seeking connection but keeping a safe distance.
Dipping their toes in.
Exactly.
It's a pretty diverse range of Tinder users.
It really is. And it just goes to show that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to using the app.
Nope. Your experience is going to be shaped by your own individual personality, motivations, and needs.
So self-awareness is key.
Absolutely. Know yourself, know what you're looking for, and don't be afraid to step away if it's not working for you.
Words to live by. Okay, so we've laid the groundwork with these 4 clusters. Now let's get into the really juicy stuff.
What are we talking about?
We're going to delve into the implications of all this. What does it mean for our relationships and for the future of dating?
All right, let's do it.
Buckle up, everyone. It's about to get real.
Deep dive time. All right, so those are 2 of the clusters.
2 down, 2 to go.
Exactly. And now we're getting to the ones that, might raise an eyebrow or two.
Oh boy. The ones that are maybe a little bit more out there?
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's hear it.
All right, so this next group is called unregulated and highly motivated.
Unregulated and highly motivated.
I feel like the name kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah, it does kind of paint a picture, doesn't it?
What are we talking here, like swiping all day, every day?
Yeah, pretty much. They're really active on the app, and they're not just browsing. They're like on a mission.
A mission for what?
Well, they scored high on impulsivity, remember?
Right.
And they had really strong motivations across all those categories we talked about. Social connection, self-enhancement, coping with negative emotions.
They're looking for a little bit of everything.
Exactly. And they're not afraid to go for it. They're also high in sensation seeking and have a strong desire for both partnered and solo sexual activities. So they're not just looking for one type of connection.
Nope. They're open to it all.
It's like they're really embracing the whole Tinder experience.
Yeah, they're definitely living that swipe life to the fullest.
Okay, so they're active, they're motivated, but is it healthy? I mean, all that swiping has to take a toll, right?
That's a good question. And to answer that, we have to go back to that problematic Tinder use scale.
Uh-oh.
Remember, this group scored the highest.
Not good.
Not ideal. It suggests that their Tinder use might be, getting a little out of control.
Like it's crossing the line from fun to problematic.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the excitement of potential connections becomes more important than actually building real relationships.
Like they're addicted to the chase.
Kinda. It's that dopamine rush you get when you get a match.
Right, that little notification that pops up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It can be really addictive and it can keep people hooked even if they're not really finding what they're looking for.
It's like they're stuck in this cycle of swiping and matching, but it's not actually fulfilling them.
Exactly. And it can be hard to break free from that cycle.
Yeah, I can see how that would be tough.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a bit of a cautionary tale for all of us to be mindful of our own swiping habits.
Yeah. It's a good reminder to check in with ourselves and make sure we're using the app in a healthy way.
Right. Like if it's starting to feel more like an obsession than a fun way to connect with people, it might be time to take a break.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've talked about the unregulated and highly motivated group. Now let's move on to the last cluster.
Okay, bring on the final Tinder type.
This last group is called unregulated-avoidant.
Unregulated-avoidant, another interesting name.
Yeah, and they're kind of a puzzle because they're unregulated, like the last group, meaning they scored high on that problematic use scale, too.
Oh, boy.
But they're different from the highly motivated group in a lot of ways.
Like how?
Well, for starters, they scored high on avoidant attachment, remember?
Yeah, that's the one where people aren't super comfortable with intimacy.
Right. They value their independence, and they might feel smothered by too much closeness.
So they might not be the best candidates for a traditional relationship.
Well, they also reported lower self-esteem and lower levels of conscientiousness.
So maybe they're not feeling super confident about putting themselves out there?
That's a possibility, but they're still on Tinder.
Right. So there's got to be something drawing them to the app. What could it be?
It's a good question. They did report high levels of solitary sexual desire.
Okay, so maybe they're using Tinder to explore that side of themselves.
It's possible they weren't as interested in casual sex as the unregulated and highly motivated group, though.
Huh. Interesting. So what are they looking for then?
Well, their interest in committed relationships was actually pretty similar to the highly motivated group.
So they want a relationship, but they don't want to get too close.
It seems that way, yeah. It's like they're drawn to the idea of connection.
But they're also afraid of it.
Yeah, they might be worried about getting hurt or losing their independence.
So maybe Tinder is a way for them to kind of test the waters without fully committing.
Exactly. It's like a way to dip their toes into the dating pool without getting in too deep.
Right. They can control the interactions and keep things at a safe distance.
And they don't have to face that fear of rejection that can come with face-to-face dating.
It's like a buffer zone.
Exactly.
I can definitely see how that would be appealing to someone who's struggling with those avoidant tendencies.
Yeah, it's like a way to get some of the benefits of dating without all the risks.
Okay, so we've got these 4 really interesting Tinder types, each with their own motivations and challenges. But there's one more thing from this study that really blew my mind.
Okay, lay it on me.
Are you ready for this? Over 20% of the participants were married,
Married.
and 44% were already in a relationship.
Wow, that's a lot.
I know. What are all these people doing on Tinder if they're already committed?
It's a really good question. And honestly, I don't think there's an easy answer.
I mean, are they looking for something they're not getting in their current relationship?
Possibly. Or maybe they're just curious.
Or maybe they're looking for a little excitement on the side.
That's a possibility too.
It's like the whole concept of monogamy is being challenged in the digital age.
I think you're right. It's definitely a conversation that we need to be having.
Yeah, because it's not just about Tinder anymore. It's about how technology is changing the way we think about relationships in general.
Exactly. It's blurring the lines and making things a lot more complicated.
So we've got these 4 distinct Tinder types, and then we've got people who are already in relationships using the app.
Yeah.
It's a wild world out there.
It really is. It's like the Wild West of dating.
And it just goes to show that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to love and relationship
Nope. Everyone's got their own path.
and their own way of using technology to navigate that path.
Exactly. And I think the most important thing is to be respectful of those differences and try to understand where people are coming from.
Yeah, because judging someone's choices is not going to help anyone.
It's just going to create more division and misunderstanding.
Okay, so we've talked about these 4 clusters and how they represent different ways of using Tinder, but I think it's important to remember that they're not rigid categories.
Right. They're more like guidelines.
Yeah, like people can move between groups over time.
And there's a lot of variation within each group, too.
It's not like everyone in the regulated group is perfectly well adjusted,
Of course not.
and not everyone in the unregulated groups is completely out of control.
Right. It's more about understanding the general tendencies and motivations that drive people's behavior on the app.
Got it. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of these 4 clusters just to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Sounds good.
So first up, we've got the regulated group.
The ones who are using the app in a healthy, balanced way.
Exactly. They're open to different types of connections, and they're not letting the app control their lives.
Right. Then we've got the regulated with low desire group.
Who might be seeking validation and connection more than anything else.
Yeah, they're not necessarily looking for a relationship, but they're finding something on Tinder that meets their needs.
Okay, and then we've got our 2 unregulated groups. The highly motivated folks who are all about that swipe life.
They're living it up.
And the avoidant folks who are dipping their toes into the dating pool but keeping a safe distance.
Testing the waters.
Exactly.
It's a pretty diverse range of users.
It really is. And it just goes to show that there's no right or wrong way to use Tinder.
As long as you're being respectful of yourself and others.
Exactly. Okay, so now that we've laid the groundwork with these 4 clusters, let's get into the bigger picture.
Okay, what are we talking about?
We're going to delve into the implications of all this.
Right.
What does it mean for our relationships?
For the future of dating.
For society as a whole?
Big questions.
Big questions. Buckle up, everyone. It's about to get real. Okay, so we've talked about these 4 different types of Tinder users. But like you said, it's a wild world out there, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach to dating.
Right. Everyone's got their own way of navigating this whole digital dating scene.
Exactly, and I think that brings up a really important question.
What is that?
Is Tinder ultimately helping or hindering our ability to form meaningful relationships?
Ooh, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
And I don't think there's a simple answer.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, Tinder gives us access to a much wider pool of potential partners than we would ever meet in our everyday lives.
It's true. Like way more people than you'd ever run into just going about your day.
Right, and for people who might find traditional dating intimidating or difficult.
Like if you get really nervous meeting new people.
Yeah, it can be a more approachable way to put themselves out there.
Yeah, it kind of takes the pressure off a little bit.
It's like dipping your toes in the water instead of jumping in head first,
Exactly. And you can get to know someone a little bit before you actually meet them in person.
which can be really helpful for some people.
But on the other hand, there's the potential for Tinder to fuel a sense of superficiality.
What do you mean?
Well, it's easy to get caught up in judging people solely on their looks.
Yeah, you're basically swiping based on a few photos and a short bio.
Right, so it's not exactly the most in-depth way to get to know someone.
And with so many options available, it's easy to get stuck in that mindset of like, well, what if there's someone better, just to swipe away?
Yeah, that fear of missing out.
It's like you never give yourself the chance to really connect with someone because you're always looking for the next best thing.
And that can be really detrimental to forming lasting relationships.
Absolutely. I mean, how can you build a real connection with someone if you're not willing to put in the time and effort?
Right, and if you're always looking for something better, you're never going to be satisfied with what you have.
It's like you're chasing a fantasy instead of appreciating the reality.
Yeah, it's like you're trading depth for breadth.
I like that. That's a really good way to put it.
So where does that leave us? I think the key takeaway is that Tinder can be both a blessing and a curse when it comes to love.
It's a double-edged sword.
Exactly. It can help us find connection, but it can also perpetuate some unhealthy patterns
So it all comes down to how we use it.
and how aware we are of our own motivations.
If you're using Tinder to boost your ego or distract yourself from deeper issues,
Or just to avoid real-life interaction.
yeah, it's probably not serving you in a healthy way.
Right. You need to be honest with yourself about what you're looking for and why you're using the app.
And if you're finding yourself getting caught in the endless swipe cycle or feeling discouraged by the superficiality of it all,
Maybe it's time to take a step back.
delete the app for a while, reconnect with yourself, and figure out what you truly want.
Exactly, because ultimately technology should enhance our lives, not control them.
Well said. I think that's a really important message to remember. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up.
All right, sounds good.
So what's the final takeaway for our listeners today?
I think the most important thing is to approach Tinder or any dating app, really, with intention and awareness.
Intention and awareness.
Yeah, know yourself, know your motivations, and don't be afraid to step away if it's not serving you.
That's great advice. And remember, whether you're a seasoned swiper or just dipping your toes into the world of online dating, real-life connections are still essential.
Absolutely.
Don't let the digital world become a substitute for putting yourself out there, meeting people organically, and building relationships based on shared experiences and genuine connection.
That's what it's all about.
It really is. So that's it for today's deep dive into the world of Tinder. Thanks for joining us, and happy swiping, everyone. But remember to look up from your phones every now and then and enjoy those real-life connections.